Landon James didn't expect to be sprinting through Central Park on a Tuesday afternoon with his 6-year-old daughter crying and yelling, "Find Max, Daddy." He's scared. His breath came in short, frantic bursts as he scanned the winding trails, the woods, the benches. Max, his scruffy, overexcited golden retriever, had bolted after a squirrel, jerking the leash right out of Landon's hand. "Stay close, Veta," he said, grabbing his daughter's hand as they slowed near the duck pond. Veta sniffled and pointed. "What if he went in there?" Landon shook his head. "He hates water, he wouldn't." But it didn't help. Veta's bottom lip trembled and Landon felt the sharp sting of panic in his chest. Max was more than just a dog. He was family. The last piece of his late wife that still made their tiny apartment feel like home. They had moved to the city 6 months ago for a job that barely covered the bills, and Max had been Veta's comfort blanket through every hard night. "Excuse me," a soft voice called behind him. "Are you looking for a golden retriever?" Landon spun around. A woman in sleek running leggings and a black zip-up jacket stood a few feet away, holding Max's leash. The dog was panting happily, tail wagging. "Max!" Veta shrieked, running forward and throwing her arms around his neck. Landon blew out a breath and bent over, bracing his hands on his knees. "Thank God!" The woman smiled and crouched down next to Veta. "He came charging toward me like a man on a mission. I figured he belonged to someone nearby." Landon looked up at her and froze. She was stunning. Her light brown hair was pulled into a perfect ponytail, but it was her eyes, calm, intelligent, and clear as glass, that made his throat tighten. "Yeah, thank you, really," he said, standing and brushing his hands on his jeans. "He's not usually like that. Well, no, he kind of is." "Max is chaos in a fur coat," she laughed. "Good chaos, though. I'm Riley." "Landon," he said, shaking her hand, "and this is Veta and the troublemaker's Max." Veta looked up at Riley with wide, curious eyes. "You caught him." "I did." "We had a whole conversation about squirrels," Riley said seriously. "He promised to behave now." Veta giggled and grabbed Max's leash. "Nice to meet you," Landon said, trying to sound casual even though he felt like his body was buzzing. "Thanks again." "You saved our afternoon." Riley hesitated, then smiled. "Actually, I was just finishing my run. If you don't mind the company, I could walk with you a bit." Landon blinked. Sure, yeah." "That'd be great." They walked together under the golden leaves, Veta skipping ahead with Max tugging her along. "You live around here?" Landon asked. "Midtown," Riley said. "You?" "Upper West, tiny apartment, rents like a mortgage, but we're close to the park and school." She nodded. "You a New Yorker?" "Not even close. We moved here from Ohio. My wife passed away last year, needed a change." Riley's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," he said quickly. "I mean, it's not really, but we're getting through it." "Veta's stronger than I am most days." Riley glanced toward the little girl ahead of them. "She seems amazing." "She is." They walked in silence for a moment before Riley spoke again. "So what do you do?" "I'm in construction, project manager. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." "Most of them anyway." Riley looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "That's a tough job." "Yeah, but I like working with my hands, always have." They reached the park exit and Veta tugged Max toward the sidewalk. "This is us," Landon said, pointing to the crosswalk. He hesitated, not sure if he should ask or if it would be weird. "I run most mornings," Riley said, reading his mind. "Same route, same time." Landon chuckled. "I guess I'll have to lose the dog again." "Or," she said, "you could just meet me." He grinned. "Deal?" Riley bent down to Veta's level. "It was nice meeting you, Veta. Take care of Max, okay?" "I will," Veta said shyly. Landon watched Riley walk away, her ponytail swinging. He had no idea she was the CEO of one of the city's biggest tech companies. No idea that the woman who just found his dog was worth more than he'd make in 10 lifetimes. No idea she was already thinking about him hours later as she stood in her penthouse, staring out over the skyline. Because Riley Pierce, billionaire, power player, and tech genius, had just fallen for a struggling single dad who didn't even know her last name. It had been 8 days since Riley found Max. Landon knew exactly how long because he'd started waking up early again, something he hadn't done consistently since before Veta was born. Every morning, he'd lace up his worn-out sneakers, tug on a hoodie, and take Max to the park under the pretense of early exercise, even though Max had never once needed convincing to go for a walk. And every morning, Riley was there. They'd walk a loop together, never long, never rushed, and talk about everything but the things people usually asked first. There were no questions about last names, no awkward small talk about career paths. She asked him about the best pizza in the city, and he asked her what book she'd read last. They debated whether pigeons had secret vendettas and who would win in a foot race, a distracted toddler or a determined dog. Veta always came along on weekends, riding her scooter beside them in her pink helmet. Riley had surprised both of them that Saturday by showing up with a tiny bell for the handlebars. "Don't worry, it's not a gift," she'd said as she handed it to Veta. "It's a bribe. I need backup noise when Max makes another break for freedom." Landon had laughed, but he hadn't missed how Veta looked at Riley after that, like she'd hung the stars just for her. Now, it was Thursday morning. The sun hadn't quite risen, and the park was still quiet. Landon leaned against a wooden fence near the reservoir, watching Riley stretch her arms above her head. "You don't look like a morning person," she said, glancing at him. "I'm not," he admitted. "But Max is, and apparently so are you." "I like the quiet before the world wakes up," she said. "Makes the day feel like it's still full of possibilities." Landon studied her for a moment. There was a calmness about her, but not the kind that came from having nothing to worry about. It was more like she carried something heavy and had made peace with it. "Do you ever get a day off?" he asked. She tilted her head. "A day off from what?" "Whatever you do when you're not saving stray dogs. You seem busy." Riley hesitated, then glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting in 40 minutes. High-rise office, long table, too much coffee." "Sounds intense." "It can be," she said, then looked at him more directly. "But I like it. I get to build things, solve problems, make decisions that actually matter." Landon nodded. "Must be nice." "You don't think what you do matters." "It does," he said, "just not in a boardroom kind of way." She watched him for a beat. "What's your escape?" He hesitated. "I go to this diner near our place after work sometimes, nothing fancy. Just a booth, a plate of something fried, and a few minutes where no one needs me to fix anything." "I like that," she said. "Sounds honest." A breeze rolled in off the water. Riley tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You ever think about doing something different?" she asked. Landon turned toward her. "Like what?" "I don't know. Starting something of your own. You strike me as someone who could build something meaningful if he had the chance." He gave a small laugh. "I don't really have the kind of life where chances fall into my lap." Riley didn't respond right away. She just looked out over the water, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "Sometimes they do. You just have to recognize them before they disappear." Before he could respond, Max barked at a jogger passing by and Riley chuckled. "He's got opinions," she said. "He's the loudest member of the household," Landon replied. She glanced at her watch again and sighed. "I have to go. Rain, check on the rest of that conversation." "Yeah," he said. "Definitely." She hesitated before leaving, then pulled something from the small pouch on her waistband. It was a folded piece of paper. "Veta mentioned she wanted to try painting," Riley said, handing it to him. "There's a weekend workshop at the Children's Museum. Thought she might like it." Landon opened the flyer, surprised. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." He looked up, but she was already jogging away, her ponytail bouncing in rhythm with her steps. That evening after dinner, Veta sat on the floor surrounded by crayons while Landon stared at the flyer again. It wasn't just the workshop. It was the gesture. The way Riley had listened. The way she paid attention not just to him, but to his daughter. He couldn't remember the last time someone had done that without expecting something in return. Across town, Riley stepped out of her town car onto the granite steps of a private club in Tribeca. The doorman greeted her by name. She nodded and walked inside past glass elevators and a wall-sized wine rack. "Miss Pierce," her assistant said, falling into step beside her. "The investors are in the West Lounge. They asked for you by name." "Let them wait," Riley said, her voice cool. "I need 5 minutes." She stepped into a private room and closed the door behind her. For a moment, her shoulders dropped. She took out her phone not to check messages, but to look at the photo she'd secretly taken that morning, Veta, grinning on her scooter. "Landon," laughing in the background, sun catching the edge of his jaw. She stared at it for a long time. Because for the first time in years, Riley Pierce wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or market shares. She was thinking about a man who didn't know her world and a little girl who had looked at her like she belonged in theirs. Landon stood frozen in the middle of the gallery entrance, feeling distinctly out of place under the cascading glass chandelier above him. The lighting was soft, elegant, and everything about the space screamed curated wealth. He tugged at the collar of his one decent button-down shirt, suddenly doubting whether it counted as nice enough for an art event. Veda clutched his hand, her eyes wide as they scanned the towering white walls and colorful canvases. "Is this where the paintings live?" she whispered. "Something like that," Landon said under his breath, guiding her forward. They'd arrived 20 minutes ago for the children's painting workshop Riley had mentioned the week before. What he hadn't expected was that it would be hosted in a private wing of the Children's Museum, closed off for what appeared to be an exclusive event. The invitation had come in a large cream envelope, delivered by courier. No explanation, just the date, time, and 2 glossy admission passes. He would have said no. Should have, probably, but Veda had begged. And when he'd called the number on the card to confirm the workshop was real, the voice on the other end had said, "You've been personally invited by a museum sponsor. Please come." He hadn't seen Riley since the morning she handed him the flyer. No runs, no texts, just silence, and now this. A tall woman with sleek black glasses approached them, clipboard in hand. "You must be Veda and Mr. James. Right this way." As she led them through a side corridor, Landon noticed the subtle security presence near each entrance, not overwhelming, but definitely there. Veda skipped ahead, completely unaware of the tension in his shoulders. They entered a sunlit room filled with easels, child-sized aprons, and long tables covered in paints and brushes. Other kids were already choosing their stations while adults mingled near the coffee bar at the back. "Daddy, look, they have glitter paint," Veda squealed, already pulling on her apron. Landon crouched. "Stay where I can see you, okay?" She nodded, then darted to a nearby easel, her curls bouncing with excitement. He stood up, only to find Riley watching him from across the room. She wasn't dressed like she was going for a morning run this time. Her cream blouse was tucked into tailored navy trousers, and her heels clicked softly as she made her way over. Still, she looked like herself, composed, calm, and completely unreadable. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure I should," Landon admitted, "but Veda's been talking about it nonstop." "I'm glad," she said simply. He studied her face. "You're not just someone who jogs in the park, are you?" "No," Riley said. "I'm not." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. Instead, she gestured toward the windows. "Want to step outside for a minute?" He followed her to a small terrace that overlooked the museum's sculpture garden. The city buzzed beyond the walls, but here it was quiet. "So," Landon said, crossing his arms. "Are you going to tell me what this is?" "I own part of this museum," Riley replied. "My foundation funds a lot of the youth programming. I thought Veda would enjoy it." "You didn't think this was something you should tell me?" he asked, not angry but confused. "I didn't want to change the way you looked at me," Landon exhaled. "You knew I'd find out eventually. I hoped it wouldn't matter by then." He leaned against the railing, processing. "You're not just wealthy. You're one of those people who shows up in business magazines, aren't you?" "Yes." "Why me, Riley? What's the angle?" "There isn't one." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I wasn't looking for anything. I found Max, we talked, and then I started waiting to see you every morning without realizing it." Landon didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "I don't belong in your world." "Maybe not," she said. "But that doesn't mean you don't belong with me." He turned to her. "You think it's that simple?" "No, I think it's complicated and probably messy, but I'm not here because it's convenient. I'm here because I care." He looked away. "You have no idea what my life's like. I work 60 hours a week to cover rent. I fall asleep at the kitchen table helping Veda with homework. I haven't been on a date in years, and the last time someone offered to help, they disappeared the second it got hard. I'm not them." "How do I know that?" She stepped closer. "Because I've never once pretended to be someone I'm not. I just didn't lead with a title." He hesitated. "You could have told me. I wanted to. I just like being seen for something other than my balance sheet." He didn't respond. Not because he didn't believe her, but because part of him did, and that terrified him. Inside, the kids were finishing their paintings. Veta waved excitedly through the glass, motioning for him to come back. "I should go," he said. "I know." As he turned, she stopped him. "Landon," he paused. "I'm not going to disappear." He gave her a look she couldn't quite interpret, part guarded, part grateful, and walked back inside. Later that night, after Veta had fallen asleep with paint still smudged on her elbows, Landon sat on the couch with a mug of tea, staring at the small canvas she'd brought home. It was a messy swirl of pink and blue, with a wobbly figure in the middle holding a leash. Next to it was a second figure with a ponytail. He traced the edges with his thumb. He didn't know what this was, or what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. Rain clung to the windows of the cafe as Landon stirred his coffee, his fingers curling around the warm ceramic like it might anchor him. Across the table, Riley sat in a simple gray coat, no makeup, no polished composure, just her. For the first time since they met, she looked uncertain. "I thought maybe I pushed too hard," she said quietly, eyes scanning his face. "That I complicated things you didn't ask for." "You didn't," Landon said. "But I needed time to figure out if I could be okay with what you didn't tell me. You have every right to be angry." "I'm not angry," he said. "I was caught off guard. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that the woman who made my daughter laugh with a scooter bell has a driver waiting outside and probably owns half the skyline." "I don't," she said quickly, a small breath of relief escaping her lips. "A quarter at most," he laughed, not because it was funny, but because it finally felt okay to. "I've been thinking," he continued. "I've spent so long trying to keep everything afloat, I forgot what it's like to let someone in." Riley looked down at her hands. "I don't want to be someone you feel like you have to explain your life to. I want to be someone who stands next to you in it." The words hit deeper than he expected. He reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "Then stop standing on the edge of it." She looked up, and for the first time since that morning on the museum terrace, her guard dropped completely. "I haven't told anyone about you," she admitted. "Not my board, not the press. I've spent years building this wall between me and the rest of the world, and suddenly, I'm thinking about paintbrushes and glitter and that ridiculous dinosaur joke Veta told me." "You told her the punchline wrong," Landon said. "She didn't notice." Riley smiled. "She just laughed like it was the best thing she'd ever heard." Landon paused. "She doesn't remember much about her mom, just the colors she used to paint with. That's why this whole art thing, it's been good for her, for both of us." "I wasn't trying to replace anything," Riley said quickly. "You're not," he said. "You're just here, and that means more than you probably realize." The rain eased into a fine mist, and Riley glanced outside. "I have to fly to San Francisco tomorrow," she said. "Just for a day, it's a summit. They expect me to give a speech about innovation and leadership, like I have it all figured out." "You don't. I know how to run a company," she said, "but I'm just now learning how to show up for people outside of it." Landon leaned back, studying her. "Do you want this?" "Us? I want something real," she said. "I want the mess and the quiet and everything in between. I want the version of myself that laughs at your dog barreling through a hedge. I want the part of me that forgot to check my emails because I was watching Veta paint." He stood, pulled a crumpled napkin from his coat pocket, and handed it to her. Written in blue pen was a child's drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, and one small, all holding hands under a crooked sun. "She gave this to me last night," he said. "Told me it was our family now." Riley held the napkin like it was made of glass. "I don't know how this works," he continued. "I don't have money. I don't speak your language when it comes to balance sheets or IPOs, but I know how to show up. I know how to be solid. And if you're looking for that, I'm here." The next morning, Riley stood on the rooftop of a gleaming San Francisco hotel, staring out at nothing as applause rang behind her. Her speech was done. Cameras had flashed. Investors were satisfied. But her thoughts were in a tiny kitchen in New York, where a little girl was probably asking for more syrup on her pancakes, and a man with calloused hands was probably humming badly while flipping them. She pulled out her phone and pressed a single contact. When Landon answered, she said, "I was thinking. A rooftop dinner might be better with 3 people." There was a pause. Then his voice came through, warm and steady. "We'll be waiting." 1 week later, Riley opened the terrace doors of her penthouse to find the dining table transformed into a kind of chaotic wonderland. A string of fairy lights crisscrossed overhead, and Veta had set the table herself lopsided placemats, mismatched plates, and a centerpiece made entirely of gummy bears stacked like a bouquet. Landon stood at the grill, flipping something that smelled suspiciously like store-bought burgers. She walked over, leaned into him, and said, "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said. "You've given us more than you know. Let me give you something normal." She touched his jaw lightly. "This is perfect." Later, as the city lights blinked around them and Veta fell asleep curled up in a blanket on the outdoor couch, Landon pulled Riley close under the stars. "You sure you want this chaos?" he murmured. "I've never been more sure of anything," she whispered back. He kissed her, slow and certain, and for the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel like it was asking too much of him. It felt like it was finally giving something back. And in the middle of a life that once felt like it had no room for anything but survival, Landon James had found something extraordinary, not a miracle, just something real. Love, the kind that came in the form of a runaway dog, a girl who painted stars, and a woman who never once asked him to change, only to stay. Riley stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her bare feet brushing the dew-damp grass that lined the perimeter. The morning air was crisp, a soft breeze stirring her hair as the city stirred awake below. She could hear faint laughter from inside Veta's and the clatter of dishes. Landon was making breakfast, again, and she didn't stop him. She turned as the sliding glass doors opened behind her. "I told her we're not putting chocolate chips in scrambled eggs," Landon said, his hair still damp from the shower, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "She's negotiating hard, though. She's relentless," Riley said, smiling. "Future litigator, maybe. She says she wants to be a vet now. But only for unicorns. I'll have my people start funding research into mythical animal medicine." Landon stepped beside her, following her gaze out across the skyline. "You're quiet." "I've been thinking," she said, "about the foundation." He looked at her, waiting. "I've always run it through intermediaries, delegated, structured, distanced myself from the human side of it. But lately, I've started wondering if that's been a mistake. You want to do more, I want to be present. Actually meet the people we're trying to help. Not just see reports and numbers. I want to visit the schools, the clinics, the programs we fund. I want to see the impact, not just sign off on it." Landon nodded slowly. "What changed? You did," she said. "Veta did. Being part of something real again reminded me what it feels like to see the results of your choices up close." "She changed me too," he said. "I used to think surviving was enough. Pay the bills, keep her safe, keep moving. But now I want her to see what it looks like when you build something lasting." "She already does," Riley said. "She watches you. Every move." Landon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Riley's breath caught. "You're not making me a partner in the company, are you?" he asked, opening it to reveal a delicate silver ring with a pale blue sapphire. She stared at it, stunned. "I know this isn't some dramatic billionaire proposal with fireworks and a yacht," he said, "but I realized something. Every morning I wake up and you're not next to me, it feels like something's off. And I don't want to go back to a life where I'm waiting for something good. I want the life where I already have it." She blinked, the weight of the moment soft and sudden all at once. "You're really doing this barefoot on a rooftop with a towel on your shoulder," she whispered. "I figured if it's us, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be true." She reached for the ring, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I don't care about yachts," she said. "I care about you, and Veta, and this weird, beautiful life we've stumbled into." He pulled her close and she rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Landon James. And I love you, Riley Pierce." Inside, Veta called out, asking if she could put whipped cream on toast. "Let's go make some questionable breakfast choices," Riley said, laughing. 6 months later, the ceremony was held in a renovated greenhouse upstate, surrounded by wild vines and sun-drenched glass. There were only 20 guests, just the people who mattered. Veda walked down the aisle first, swinging a basket of petals with theatrical flair, wearing a crown of daisies she'd insisted on making herself. Riley wore a simple ivory dress, her hair down, and no jewelry but the ring he'd given her. Landon waited at the altar in a navy waistcoat and a crooked smile, his hands steady despite how fast his heart was pounding. The vows were short, sweet, and unpolished just like them. Landon promised to never let a day go by without saying he loved her. Riley promised to always keep a drawer of glitter paints in the house. Veda clapped at the kiss like it was the grand finale of a Broadway show. Afterward, they danced under lanterns strung between the trees while Max snored happily at their feet. Landon held Riley close as the night wind rustled through the leaves and the stars blinked awake above them. "You know what I was thinking," she said, her cheek against his chest. "What? That this is the first time I've ever felt like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He kissed the top of her head. "Me too." A year later, Riley stood in the middle of a sun-drenched studio, watching Veda paint on a canvas taller than she was. The walls were covered in her work, bright, chaotic, joyful. In the corner, Max chewed on a squeaky toy shaped like a baguette. The foundation had opened the space 2 months earlier, a free arts and mentorship center for underfunded schools. Riley visited every week, not to speak or pose or be seen. Just to sit on the floor with the kids and listen. Landon arrived just as the afternoon session was winding down, a pencil behind his ear and sawdust on his sleeves. His construction business had taken off after a few key contracts, some quietly facilitated by Riley's network, though he never knew. He wanted to make it on his own, and she respected that. He kissed her cheek and handed her a coffee. "Veda wants to show you her newest masterpiece," he said. "I saw it already," Riley said. "It's titled Rainbow Explosion of Doom. She's really leaning into drama this month. She gets it from you." They watched as their daughter proudly unveiled her creation to a group of younger kids, explaining every color with exaggerated hand gestures. "She's going to take over the world," Riley said. "She already runs our house." They stood in silence, letting the warmth of the moment settle around them. "Think we'll ever slow down?" Landon asked. "I hope not," Riley said. "But even if we do, I think we'll always be the kind of people who find the magic in the ordinary. Like glitter paint and Tuesday night pancake dinners." "Exactly," he took her hand, lacing their fingers together. And in that small studio, surrounded by laughter, color, and the life they'd built from nothing but chance, they knew they had already found everything they'd ever need, together. Forever.